Jack Andrews here. Thank you for checking out this episode of my webcast. This one was 5 ways to work smarter, not harder. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe and set the notifications so you can be notified next time I go live. Thank you and enjoy. Okay, Brian has asked, do you think the art of line grinding is dying out as legalization expands? So, Brian, I'm going to assume by line grinding you mean catching lines before they move. If you see a line move at a market-making book like Pinnacle, you grab the line at a slower book, maybe stateside. I'm assuming that's what you mean. If you don't mean that, then go ahead and throw another question in explaining it better, but I'll speak to this. Yes, I do think that line grinding or steam chasing or just looking for value on lines is a dying art. But I don't think it's because of legalization so much. I think it's because of services like Don Best. Everyone is no longer trying to make their own book. They're just copying what some other book is doing. They're writing scripts on the back end, and if the line moves at Pinnacle, they move, and then they add extra vig to it. It's pretty common these days to see it happen with a lot of these sports books. They're just copying each other. There's very little originality left. So it is tougher now to be a line grinder. However, what we've also seen since legalization started is a lot more companies are coming online and they're not using Don Best. They're off screen. So this sort of helps because often when you don't use Don Best, you're often not checking Don Best as well. Part of their arrangement when they sign up for the Don Best services, they get to use it because they give their information to it. So what we're seeing now is that a lot of the newer legal sites are not on Don Best, and sometimes you can catch them napping. But again, all markets tend towards efficiency, right? So the sports betting market is only going to become more efficient as well. I don't think it's so much a product of legalization as it's just a product of market efficiency. All right, so there's another question here on what are the best tools to use to get automation? Is there any certain programming language that works better than others? That's a good question. So you don't need to program to do automation, but you might find that it is easier that way. If you're just starting out programming, a scripting language is better than some kind of deeper machine coding programming language. And by scripting language, I mean something like Python or R, where you're basically just writing a script that can get followed. And sometimes you can basically add scripts together to then create a bigger, more robust program. So, I would recommend if you had to go the programming route, you would use Python probably. Web scraping is really easy with Python. There's a library called Beautiful Soup that's very popular. It helps you scrape a lot of different websites, and it's probably the best tool for gathering the data. And then your second step there is processing the data. So you dump it into some kind of data frame, and then you process it. In the past, I've used Python to gather data, and then I've used Excel to process it just because it's a little more visual for me. And it helps me kind of visualize the data faster. You can do everything from, like, for instance, Major League Baseball has an API that's in XML format, when XML is just a basic markup language. And you can query that, and you can get live scores and information and stats as they happen in the game. It's what all of these in-game scoreboards are built from. Major League Baseball is very good with that. Some of the other sports are not as good with that. The NBA is a tough one to scrape. And I'm just speaking from experience on those. But you can use those to help out with your automation. I think I mentioned in the first webcast, or maybe it was the second one, I forget which, GitHub. So anytime you're looking to do any of these automation tasks, get involved with programming, check GitHub first. There's probably going to be somebody on there who's done what you're trying to do, and they can help you out. So that's a good one. A couple more questions have shown up here. How do you know when a market becomes efficient? That's a good question, Brandon. Thank you for asking that. When you no longer win, right? That's kind of the short answer, but basically, as you chart yourself, as you compile your records, and you start to see that you no longer have the closing line value that you once had, or you no longer have even the results that you once had. That's when you start to say, this market may become more efficient. I'll use an example that I used earlier in the broadcast. First inning Major League Baseball lines. There was a time when Major League Baseball first innings were all priced with the no being the prohibitive favorite. Yes was always a plus number. Now, when baseball starts again, you'll see that yes is now usually the favorite. So think about that. They've become more efficient. It's very obvious to anyone who's bet them that, I don't get the value here that I used to get. But that shows you like what some of the angles were back in the day, because the market was priced inefficiently. Somebody asked anonymously here, this content is great. Since it's free and you've made it clear you do not want to charge, is there a charity you would like us to donate to if we choose to? That's a very generous thing to say. I don't have any in mind. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of charities right now that are in need of donations. My goal here with this channel and with this process is not so much monetization. I mean, even if I get to the point where I can throw a commercial at the start of this YouTube video, it's not going to make me a lot of money. Monetization is not, at this point, a real money grab for this content. It's just far too niche in terms of the audience. So this is just me kind of giving back and getting the content out there to people, because I think making more educated sports bettors actually helps me in the long run, because it gets more people betting. It gets them to last longer. It gets sports betting to become more sustainable. And in the end, that helps me because my sharp action blends in a little bit more. The sports books will have less to worry about. Whereas if everyone was betting and they lose and they get disgusted by it and never come back, I'm the only one left in the sports book and my action sticks out. So that's my goal here. That's my non-altruistic reason for this, is to help me in the long run be able to get a more sustainable sports betting product. I appreciate your thought about donating to a charity from this. But in the meantime, just stick with me, subscribe, tell your friends. I really appreciate it. It's neat to put these together and see where they go. How would you recommend identifying value on NFL draft props? Okay, so Ryan asked this. This is a good question, Ryan. I'm usually not a person that bets the NFL draft. In late April, I am usually heads down on baseball, as well as finishing up the basketball season. There's the two sports that I mainly bet, Major League Baseball and NBA. Early season Major League Baseball is usually a very good time for me, so I generally do not pay attention to the draft. This year I did. This year I watched various draft information things. I listened to all the pundits. I actually read Twitter about it, which is kind of scary. And I'm not sure I'm any smarter about it as a result. This year is different with the NFL. There's less workouts. There's less in-person testing of skills. And so we're going by a lot of what people say about somebody. That's a little bit scary, right? So I did bet some NFL draft props. But what I did is I just looked for value. I looked at the sharp books and I looked at the square books and compared the lines and bet the ones that I could. I did this early on. It's probably been at least 2 weeks now since I made my last NFL draft prop. My bets still look pretty good, line value-wise, but some have moved against me. I guess the consensus has moved in some cases. But here's the thing. The limits weren't too high with NFL draft props, so I wasn't going to spend too much time looking into it. So if I were somebody who wanted to look into the NFL draft and figure out ways to identify value, I would just compare books, sharp books to square books. And if you want to go deeper than that, then you can read the mock drafts and things like that. But understand, this is a abnormal year. This is one outside of the scope of how it's usually going to go when it comes to the NFL draft. So you're not going to learn any long-term skills related to this draft that you could use in the next draft, hopefully. Any recommendations for line making or understanding outcome probabilities? Just finished up the logic of sports betting and enjoyed the nitty gritty of it. Yeah, Xavier, that was his question here. And you're right, the logic of sports betting, if you enjoyed the nitty gritty of that, then there's a lot more for you to find and come about. So when you go about the basics of line making, there's a couple skills you need to probably get under your belt. Now, these aren't going to allow you to, in 30 minutes, be able to become an effective line maker, but you should Google the terms ELO. ELO models are a way that a lot of people use to make lines, and they're kind of the most basic of models. Basically, they're just comparing if one team wins and one team loses, no matter what the margin was, then there's a strength of schedule, a strength of power there with those teams, and you can easily model out any league based on ELO models. It's pretty simple to understand. It's actually more simple than I'm making it sound. But I would go ahead and start and try to make your own ELO model. There's always ones out there you can compare yourself to, and start from there. And if you want to go into that modeling and making your own lines, that's probably the best place to start. I hope to do some videos on kind of basic modeling. Since we have guests next week, I might have more time to do it. I might throw together a pre-recorded video that is, the basics of modeling. We'll see if it happens. It's a little daunting to do a pre-recorded one where I'm doing screen captures and all this stuff, but I've got nothing but time right now. When you talk about a network, are you referring to other bettors for exchanging picks and info? For example, Rufus likes a side and told you about it. Do you play it? I generally don't take other people's advice on what to play. Like I don't exchange picks. I like to see what they're on if they're betting the same sport as me, because I like to compare it to myself, but I don't necessarily follow anyone else's picks. But information is key. So now if I was talking to Rufus, now Rufus and I don't really bet the same sports, but if we were, let's use an example. If Rufus told me that he liked a side of a game, generally I'm not going to ask him why, but if he wants to volunteer that information, I would gladly listen. And then I would see if I liked independently that same side. I don't want it to influence my thought, but I also want to be able to test myself against it. And that's just how I work. You don't have to work that way. If you wanted to get a group of people together and all just make picks with each other, that's fine. I just find that really inefficient, because picks are like, that old saying of like, you can give a man a fish and he's, not hungry for a day. You can teach a man to fish and he's never hungry a day in the rest of his life. I may have butchered that, but the point being is I want to find the process behind it. I don't want to just take your pick and go bet it. And chances are I'm probably not going to get as good a line as you got, especially if you're someone like Rufus, who's definitely going to move the market on anything he plays. I kind of want to learn how to do it myself. So, maybe someday I'm beating Rufus to those games. So that's just the way I work about it. But when I talk about network, I'm talking about more exchanging information more than exchanging picks. All right. So Chadwick says, I've noticed as I listen to podcasts, Periscopes, YouTube, etc., that I'm drinking from a fire hose. Any recommendations on sorting all this information? Yeah, that's a good point, Chadwick. I go through times where I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, and I kind of have been doing this for a long time. So I can't say it's going to stop. It's unfortunate, but sometimes you are going to take in a lot of information, and you need to decide what information you're going to absorb and what information is just going to blow by you. I found a lot of times I listen to podcasts at 1.5x or 2x speed, to just kind of speed them up and process the information faster. It's really tough. I don't have a good answer for you, Chad. I wish I did, but you just have to basically pick and choose and find what the good information is and what the stuff that you can forget about. Have you built a network? This is another anonymous question. Have you built a network of other bettors to check with first and cross picks to avoid juice? Okay, so like cross betting with each other. Well, no, I haven't done that. I'm not sure I have enough people that would bet similar stakes that would want to do that. Then you get to have to exchange money back and forth and things like that. I don't have any problem getting outs, finding outs, using outs. But if I did, that could be a possibility. But really, that only works for like major markets, and you have to agree on the price and the line. And there's a section in the book Guys and Dolls where somebody says, eventually someone's going to tell you that the Jack of Spades is going to jump out of this deck of cards and shoot cider at you. And if they do that, you're going to say, there's no way that'll ever happen, so I'll bet any money against that. Well, you can be sure as heck that you're going to end up with an earful of cider if that happens. Another quote I butchered. But the point being is, if somebody smart likes another side, that's more reason for you not to want to bet the side you like, rather than to want to, game up and take their wager. So that's kind of how I've always approached it. And a lot of the people that I network with, if they like the other side, then I'm actually looking at it twice and trying to figure out, what did I miss? Do you have any opinion? This is Brian asking this. Do you have any opinion on Major League Baseball's idea to hold games only in Florida or Arizona? And how would that affect betting on baseball? We all saw that earlier this week. I'm not sure what the deal with that was, why they were bringing that up, because it seemed totally crazy. They would all gather the teams in Arizona, and they'd play the games out there. I saw that the East Coast teams would play at 10 a.m. West Coast time, so those games would be in the afternoon in the East Coast. The West Coast teams would play starting at 8 p.m. at night, so when it's a little cooler out there, to get away from the heat of the afternoon sun in Arizona. It just seems like it's a desperate grab, and I'm not sure how the logistics of any of this would work. Hey, I would love to have sports back. I would love to be able to bet on real sports as much as anyone, but I just don't see how a lot of these sequestering, isolating, options they've laid out are ever going to work. So for the time being, we'll just have to go with it. One thing I do want to bring up, and I brought this up on a podcast I did the other day, is you should be thinking about situations where, shortened seasons, how it would affect certain sports. Case in point, the NFL. The NFL still seems like they think they can start on time in September, maybe without people in the stands, but they can start on time with the regular season. But it's very unlikely that they can do a full preseason. We've already canceled some OTAs. The draft is altered. So it's going to be very hard for teams that are doing a preseason under either a new coach, a new offensive scheme, a new defensive scheme, a new quarterback. That's going to be all very tough on those teams. So that's a good angle to look at now and be ready for down the line. Would there ever be an advantage, Jerry asked this, would there ever be an advantage for you betting from UK or Ireland where betting income is tax-free? Well, sure, Jerry, yeah, it totally would be. Canada as well. If you're not a professional or you don't claim to be a professional, gambling income is tax-free in Canada as well. Yeah, the U.S. tax system with gambling is really bad. I will be doing a video on that at some point. I'll be talking about the tax advantages of being a professional gambler like myself. In my instance, I can write off a lot of what I do, my expenses. I have a huge allotment that I can put towards retirement savings, IRAs. Basically the average worker can put like 4%. A sole proprietor, someone who files a Schedule C like myself, I can do 25% of my income goes into IRA funds, which is very useful right now to get money in while the market's low. They're very, all my expenses can be covered in terms of write-offs against my gambling income. So there are different things that a professional bettor uses, but sure, I'd love to be tax-free. I don't even want to imagine how much I've paid in taxes over the past decade and a half. Anyway, thanks for depressing me, Jerry. But the point being is, would I ever want to move over there or set up shop over there? I don't know if I can go that far with it. I'd still be an American. I'd still be subject to tax laws, even though I was spending part of my year over there. And for visa concerns, I couldn't spend more than 6 months over there anyway. So it would have to be some of a company setup. Now you're getting very complicated. So I don't think it's anything I'll ever look into, but maybe another syndicate that is more complex in their organization than I am could possibly look into that. Sure. Okay, so I think we've reached the end of our questions, and we've just about reached the end of our hour. So I would like to thank you all for attending. Keep in mind, next week we're going to have Rufus Spanky, and myself. I think that's going to be really fun. It's going to be a lot more entertaining than just me talking at you. And I think it's going to be a good one. So make sure to get in here early next week. The Zoom room, I'm sure, is going to fill up next week. And thank you for attending this one. And I'll talk to you next time.